say a very big thank you to the Adelaide Arts Festival, the Festival Centre, and of course our arts-loving, very lively crowd right here in Adelaide. Give yourselves a round of applause, please. Remember, you can continue the discussion now on Q&A Extra with Tracey Holmes and a guest, Pawan Luthra, the publisher of Indian Link, on News Radio and Facebook Live. Next Monday on Q&A, Tony Jones is back to turn the focus onto politics and the media with the former Director General of Al Jazeera Network, Wadar Khanfar, Claire Wardle, the Research Director at First Draft, which targets fake news, veteran journalist, editor and broadcaster Mark Day, and two politicians caught in the 24-hour news cycle, Liberal Senator Zed Seselja and Labor frontbencher Terry Butler. We'll end tonight with Martha Wainwright performing a song from her new album, Goodnight City. It's a beautiful, touching farewell to a friend lost to cancer entitled Traveller. Thanks for watching Q&A. Good night.
You held my children tight. You made them feel alright. Ain't it hard, ain't it hard? Just to live, just to live.
And we are actually going to leave Martha Wainwright and the Q&A TV team there. Welcome to Q&A Extra here on ABC News Radio. Tracey Holmes with you. As you know, each week we have a special guest in the studio. This evening my guest is Pawan Luthra, the CEO of the Indian Link Media Group, sponsor of the arts and an award-winning Multicultural Journalist of the Year. Pawan, welcome to Q&A Extra.
Thank you, Tracey.
Now, of course, we're going to continue tonight's discussion and take the discussion wherever you want to take it. We're taking your calls on 1300 22 5576. And, of course, you can follow us on the ABC News or Q&A Facebook pages. Post your remarks there or give us your calls. I just want to start with you, Pawan. Mm-hmm. We heard quite a bit of discussion. There were a number of people on Facebook asking the question, why should the arts be propped up? And what was interesting was that I think Kim Williams had quite a fascinating comment to make on that. But what's your view? Should the arts be propped up? Because as we know, we look around Australia at the moment. Western Australia's just had their election. Unemployment is a huge issue. In South Australia, where tonight's Q&A program was, we've got industries wrapping up, closing down. The homeless are increasing around the country. And we're talking about the arts and funding. Is it valid?
Tracey, I feel that arts has become more about the economy rather than society. Now, money can fill the pockets of bank accounts or buy properties, but that does not satisfy the soul. Art does that. And that is where, as countries develop, it is more important for art to also grow within society. Arts are very valuable in themselves. They make us richer. They make us have a more meaningful life. They're seen as important in giving us self-expression, thinking creatively, dealing with stress and community harmony. So governments have a responsibility and should be held accountable for their help in building and funding creative arts in society. I would say arts is about storytelling. That's what came out today in the Q&A. It's about literature, performing arts, culinary arts, media arts. And we need to have the storytelling going on in our society, especially in communities which may not otherwise get a chance, like the refugees, like the indigenous community. If we don't have funding for the arts, our community will suffer, our families suffer, our culture suffers, and stories get lost. They do not get told.
All right, that is a very valid point. Let's take our first caller this evening. Sue is from Terralgan. Hi, Sue. Oh, hang on. Sue is here. Hi, Sue.
Hi. How are you going?
Very good. Thanks for calling in. What would you like to say?
I'm very upset as an Australian. I'm very proud of our Indigenous people, and Sarah did a wonderful job tonight. She spoke about having mental health issues, and I'm a person that really cares about people with mental illness and depression and homeless people, and I'm right behind her. I don't feel that it's nice or it should be in the paper about people being racist towards our Indigenous people or any person from another country, or, and I just feel that we need to do something about mental illness, and I agree with what the lady said before about homelessness, because a lot of people that are homeless suffer with mental health issues.
All right, yep, that's a very good point. Thanks so much for that, Sue.
No worries, thank you.
That's okay. There's quite a lot of Facebook comments along this line as well, and also relating to Bill Leak. Many people saying that they feel sorry that Bill Leak passed away, but that his comics were awful. Bill Leak, not sad. Sarah Hall says, not celebrating, but not sad. He's caused terrible damage. Trevor on Facebook says, whatever we think of Bill, the hateful comments about him over the news of his death were a new low in public commentary. And I think this brings us back to a comment that Mem Fox made, which was really interesting. And I think I've thought about this myself a number of times. We're fighting for the right to be offensive, and I don't know what that actually says about a country. It's probably not the way you hope a country or a society is developing, but this is the problem when things are so divisive, aren't they?
They are. The idea would be to find a balance, and balance is in anybody's mind or their own perception of what the balance could be. The word which is often used is called the pup test, but I don't think the pup test really works. It's more a matter of our own sensibilities and where we stand on issues.
Our next caller is with us. Michael is calling from Mornington Island. Hi, Michael.
Hello.
We haven't had a call from Mornington Island before, so welcome.
It's good being here.
Good. What would you like to say?
I just wanted to touch on a point that a questioner raised on the show tonight, and that is that whether art could be self-sufficient in its funding, and I'm not real sure about the amount of public money currently allocated to the arts, but would it be not, if there was a market to be consumed, that people would be consuming it if it was appealing to them?
So you're saying, like the argument is put for all sorts of things, why prop up an industry that is not generating its own money and profits and being able to reinvest?
Absolutely. And don't get me wrong, I value the arts and I think it has a place, but to what extent do we throw more public funds at it, and if people aren't going to consume the product?
Mark, I mentioned earlier about the importance of art in society. It's extremely difficult to measure it purely on monetary terms. There can be efficiency indexes and so on, but I think art needs to survive, needs to be given some public funding. But perhaps we need to open ourselves to other sources of funding. For example, Tracey, something which the United Kingdom does is called the Arts Lottery. So the principal underpinning is how to invest in a national lottery, which can ensure more people can be given access to arts. A couple of years ago, the Arts Council in England raised about £350 million from the government, but yet raised about £267 million from the national lottery. Will this work in Australia? We are a nation which does love to have a punt. On Melbourne Cup. We bet almost $140 million. Last year, Australians bet $7.1 billion. So if some of that can come across to funding art, it does give some balance between public funding and other sources of getting money.
You might have hit the nail on the head without even realising, Pawan. Maybe what we need is more betting on the arts. Maybe that would get more Australians in. Michael, can I just ask, what do you do on Mornington Island?
I am a teacher.
Yeah,
right.
And do you teach art?
Well, no, there's a specialised art teacher.
Okay,
right.
All right.
I guess half the barrier to people accessing the arts is it's such a matter of opinion. I think is whether one likes it or not, and how they access it.
Well, Michael, that's the beauty about exploring different types of art. If they're all available, there could be something which somebody would like, and that, I think, is a fantastic opportunity.
Michael, Thanks so much for your call. You take care.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to Kira from Redfern. And Kira, you've got a comment about private sector funding in the arts?
I was just going to say, I think there's probably some unexplored opportunities for the private sector to get involved in arts funding, and for different industries to maybe sponsor particular forms of the arts that they're passionate about. And maybe the government could look into making incentives for the private sector to get more involved in the arts.
Yep.
Kira, look, I totally agree. I think there needs to be more philanthropy in arts. Australians love giving. Whenever there's a bushfire or floods, we do have Australians contributing. But the question is, does it reach high enough? Do corporates do it? Do individuals with more wealth do it? So why not explore options of more donations coming in to art in Australia? I think it was touched in the Q&A section today. I'm saying in America, it's a matter of prestige. It's a matter of honor to be contributing to arts. In Australia, perhaps we need to get some mentors over. We need to get some speakers who do give to arts to basically kickstart this within our society, especially at the higher end. Perhaps there could be options for companies, if they get above a certain turnover, to contribute something to arts. I know in India, there is a corporate social responsibility program where companies with more than about $150 million in turnover have to put 2% towards social responsibility. Perhaps we extend that to arts and culture.
That sounds fantastic. Kira, does that help with your line of thinking?
Yeah, definitely. I think, there's definitely a place for, social responsibility for different corporates to get involved. I suppose, there's just always the idea of there's sometimes a bit of controversy, when you look at who it is that's sponsoring these things. So we need to make sure that it's businesses that are on the right track.
All right. Thanks very much for your call today.
Tracey, thanks, Kira. Another point could be that people who advise on donations, like lawyers, tax lawyers, financial advisors, can be better educated about structures on how donations can take place. At the moment, there is about 0.4% average donation per Australian of their income towards arts and culture. Perhaps targets of 1.5 over the next 5 to 10 years. It's just a matter of growing it, as long as there's education, there's systems in place as to how monies can flow in to fund arts and culture.
All right, let's just take a listen to something that Kim Williams had to say on the program today.
I have difficulty with binary arguments that say this or that, and that see things as exclusionary rather than inclusionary, in terms of comparing the investment in creative activity as compared with manufacturing activity.
Yeah, so the whole sort of binary argument, there's room for everything, isn't there, in our society? And I think it's that pool of everything that makes us the society we want to be. So we have to stop having these discussions that comes at the cost of that. We have to find a way of bringing it all into the mix.
All moving together.
Yeah. We're taking your calls on Q&A Extra here on ABC News Radio. Pawan Luthra is my guest in the studio today. The number is 1300 22 5576. And of course, we are also streaming live on Facebook. There is a caller comment here. Bartholomew from Annandale had a question for Pawan. Why does a ticket to the theatre cost $77?
Wonderful question. And still, I believe that it just goes back to the question of the cost of putting theatre together. Perhaps we need to take a step back and look at some options as to what are the different costs in terms of manpower, labor, cost of hire, security services, and whether $77 is a reasonable cost. I do note at festivals like the Sydney Festival, there are a number. In the 2017 festival, there were more than 150 events. About 50 of them were free. A majority of them had average tickets between $30 and $80. So, I guess...
And isn't that part of the deal? Because a lot of the criticism tonight, there were lots of people who were really happy with the discussion, but a lot of people that were quite critical on Facebook and Twitter were effectively saying that, is it just too highbrow? How can it be accessible for everybody? And I think that festival you're talking about,
Sydney Festival, Sydney Writers Festival,
free events and getting people involved in those events, and suddenly you're opening it up to a whole new market that may not have otherwise been there.
True. So the $70 plus GST, I guess, is a bit of a sweet spot. And I guess the organisers have put that number together to make it sustainable over a longer term.
All right, our next caller is from Melbourne. Anisha, how are you?
Hi, good. I was just thinking about, so there's some politics. We've got state and federal legislation in all the states that discriminates against persons with perceived disability and then tortures them and puts them in arbitrary detention. Now, artists cannot speak about this on any platform. They're not given a platform. Now, I'm thinking there's a lot of really fearful people out there, and I noticed Ursula, put upon herself that she was mentally ill, and I thought how awful that she victimised herself when it wasn't really her problem. It was that the play did not allow her to speak enough, and she was an actor rather than an activist, and she wasn't actually able to speak her words in that moment. And I think plays really have to get a really good sense of what is happening now, because as an artist I got pushed out of the arts and ended up I have my own gallery now, but the point is that's not about the activist stuff. I just stand on the street and get on my soapbox and talk through things, because there's so much white coat propaganda out there, and people will just put those victim-blaming labels on them. And that's not the truth at all. We need to repeal the mental health laws, but that's then got to go through the courts before the arts even take hold of it. And I thought the arts were first. Artists are supposed to be visionaries and be there first, but we're not putting those kind of artists, giving enough of those artists a platform. And I'm very happy the First Nations people are really getting a lot more of a platform now than they were. But I went and saw Correndite, which was in Melbourne. I really felt like throwing things at the white fellas, even though I knew they were actors, but it makes you so angry, all that stuff that's happening. And when you know this stuff's happening still now.
All right.
It's outrageous to sit in an audience when you're being vilified. So when the white coat terms are perpetuated on the stage or in a festival, on a platform, you're just thinking, I can't take this, or in a Bill Leakes cartoon, I can't take this. I am not going to bother going to theatre, or I'm not going to bother going to that, because they don't speak for me.
All right, Anisha.
Where I am at the moment, because I had 14 years of forced psychiatry. It was torture. Now, this is happening to a quarter of the population. They were walking wounded, they're poisoned, and no one listens because they can't speak out because they're too afraid, because the torture will get worse if they are under forced treatments.
Anisha, thank you so much for your call. We can hear your passion there, and sorry to hear that you've had a tough time, but as you say, having the ability to go and stand on a soapbox and to be able to speak to people who are walking by and perhaps tell the stories that may not have been told on the bigger stages or to the bigger audiences.
Tracey, I also agree with Anisha on the basis of divorcing art funding from politics. There has to be an arm's length between the funding body and the government and the artist, so that they can be artists coming forward with ideas of which they're passionate about, but may not fall in the right box for the government to tick. So it's fairly important to make sure that we do have that distinction.
All right, there's a Facebook comment from Marie. Prior to Q&A starting, Four Corners was showing American citizens living as refugees in their own country due to the downturn in manufacturing in the US. This is exactly what is happening in Australia. People are hurting. They don't have spare money for anything other than life essentials. And sorry to burst your bubble, the arts aren't up there. There's a tweet from Lisa Alexander. Australia doesn't have a culture of philanthropy. So a number of different issues that we can all throw into the mix and join in part of this conversation. Q&A extra here on ABC News Radio. Let's head to Daniel now. Daniel, you're calling in from, you're driving on the Hume Highway.
Yes, I'm just down near Gundagai.
Wow.
Very nice. What are you up to? What would you like to say?
I've had a deep philosophical question that I've had for a long, long time. And it's about, my question is, why is it that it is so acceptable for explosions and violence and car chases and car crashes and death, murder and mayhem to be seen on TV and movies and things like that? Why is it so acceptable for that, yet when we see scenes of compassion, and love and things like that, like, for example, two men holding hands, two women holding hands, acts of pure love between two people, why is it that is looked upon more with shock, horror and revulsion than somebody getting their head blown off through?
I don't know. I don't know if that's actually the case because
I think it's getting more and more acceptable, and
we see a lot more of it. But I think possibly, Daniel, what you might be referring to is that audiences for that other stuff are always going to be bigger for whatever reason. People like to see that. I don't think it's that the other is a shock. I think, in fact, it's the shock value thereafter.
Which people do like seeing, which is a shame in itself.
And the same as, people going to Formula One, not all of them, but a lot of people hoping to see a car crash, or people going to horror movies because they want to be afraid. It's the other that they're seeking for whatever reason, isn't it? I think that's probably more the point than...
So the fault is not in others but in ourselves that we enjoy these gory things.
Yeah, it's gory, exactly. Daniel, thank you very much for your call.
Safe driving.
Yeah, definitely. Let's go to Andrew. Hi, Andrew.
Oh, hi, how are you going?
Very good, thanks.
That's the way. I just wanted to make a brief comment and I guess draw the listeners' attention to the juxtaposition between the talking of arts funding and then, I guess, the treatment and the appreciation or the commentary around Bill Leake's art, and I'd call it art, particularly, if we're discussing things like narratives, then I think there's a narrative to be built up and to be discussed around Bill Leake's art of resilience and perhaps combating work that might be seen as offensive by some people with perhaps, approaching it more with a reasoned counter-argument than revulsion or boycott. I think that there's a real narrative to be opened up about resilience and robustness in society, especially in a democracy like ours.
Andrew, that is such a great point, and that's where so much of the debate has been missing, hasn't it? Because I know that if your idea, and I don't like the idea of being offensive or repelling certain sectors of society, but if it happens, you can't say, well, all of, this kind of free speech is fine, but that kind of free speech isn't, because that's a very dangerous line. Once you start drawing those lines, how far do you go with it? And I think, Andrew, your point is so good that you need to combat it with a better argument, or you need to, draw attention to the fact that, yes, there are other ways of seeing this whole situation. Pawan.
No, I agree with you, Tracey. We had people write open letters to the newspapers that they had a chance to express their point of view and why they disagreed. So that allowed a bit more debate to come out.
Yeah. Let's go to, thanks very much for your call. Let's go to George at Lakemba. And George, where are you? Let's find you on, he was on 5091. No, I don't think George is there. 5099. Let's try that. Hello, George.
Hello.
Hi, we've got you.
I'm here.
Good. We're going in and out of lights here. We're having blackout, the lights are coming back on. Blackout, lights are coming back on. So if you're watching on Facebook Live, that's
exactly
not our doing. It's not a disco, it is the News Radio studio. All right. What would you like to say, George?
Yeah, sounds like you're having some artistic installation going on. Firstly to that lady who said, people can't afford the arts and, times are tough. We all know that. But the point is, it's only in the arts that those issues tend to get discussed, because politicians never want to talk about the bad news unless they can get something out of it personally, which usually means when they're in opposition, not when they're in government. But I wanted to bring up the topic, which I suspect is close to your heart, Tracey, about the connection between sport and art, and it was discussed on the and often there seems to be a conflict between certain people who either love sport and hate art, and vice versa. I'm one of those people, I suspect you are, that love both and see the connection with both. In fact, I consider them to be on the same spectrum. In fact, Woody Allen, I think, said that sport was the ultimate form of theatre in some ways, because, there's a defined plot and certain characters that people get to know and develop with, and there are ultimate variations, so you don't necessarily get bored watching the same game all the time. But the point he was trying to make is that it is a form of theatre. There's some aesthetic principles at work. So people who make this artificial divide in my mind between the two, missing the point. Sort of playing a game or watching a game, there's an aesthetic principle at work, an aesthetic enjoyment that can be derived. And obviously some people naturally, because of their way they're brought up or their own inclinations, like one thing over another or don't like certain things, that's fine. But the point is you don't sort of cut off your nose to spite your face and sort of become belligerent and say, oh, we shouldn't have any money for sport or we shouldn't have any money for the arts. Unless you're, of course, the Institute of Public Affairs has got brought up on Q&A, who doesn't want subsidies for either of them, which ironically, of course, the people who tend to support the Institute of Public Affairs tend to be well-heeled enough not to need subsidies to go to the opera and to buy the expensive tickets of the VIP boxes and corporate boxes.
George, you need your own radio show.
If you're offering Tracey, I'm available. I'll finish off with this. The other point that was brought up, I think, might be by Neil Armfield, was about Finland and music education. I've been on about this for a long time. One thing that we could certainly do is that music education, which was gutted over the years by both sides of government in schools and high schools, I think is crucially important because not only does it develop those appreciation for the aesthetic principles and different kinds of music and different kinds of arts, but it also has knock-on effects in terms of it's been shown to actually improve your ability in terms of mathematics and cognitive abilities, geometric abilities and so forth, and ability to learn. So I think people need to sort of look at the arts as a way of not being able to broaden the mind, being able to broaden people's capabilities of being able to do other things as well as have that appreciation for the arts themselves.
George, there's nothing you've said that I disagree with. Now, how frightening is that? The whole combination of sport and the arts, I agree with you. I think it's the same thing, actually. I really do think sport it's that
it's
whole
a big theatre in itself.
It is, and it's like watching dancing. You know, when you're watching great footballers flying through the air, it's no different to watching the ballet. And people that say it's either one or the other, I really don't get that.
I'm not sure if I'd like to see the footballers doing ballet in the leotards. That could be a scary sight, Tracey.
George, thank you so much for your call. Appreciate that. Yes.
If I might add something over there was a survey done by the Australia Council a couple of years ago, and they did find out in the survey that 1 in 2 Australians do take part in art. And the biggest change which has come over the years is the number of Australians playing music, either playing an instrument or singing in a choir. So there is a connection with music coming in to increase the participation in arts in Australia.
George, thank you so much for your call. Let's head to Con at Pymble. Hello, Con.
Oh, good evening to you, Tracey.
How are you going?
Very well, thank you very much, ma'am. I have a question for Pawan and for yourself, and it's to do with something that really hasn't received much attention this evening on television or on radio, and that's the subject of arts tourism.
Totally. Pawan and I were talking about this before Q&A started, actually, because we mentioned the Mona Gallery in Tasmania and what a huge success that has been.
Are we doing enough to promote our galleries, our music, our plays and so on? Well, first of all, even within Australia to other states, but to countries overseas. We promote everything else. We promote our coastline, sort of just travel industry, I suppose, our sports. But what about music? And the other question is, who should be doing that? Should it be a government thing, or do you think this can be done with some sort of commercial viability in the private sector?
Excellent question, Con. I believe it's fairly important to promote, as you said, cultural tourism. If I look at art fairs, perhaps they need to be done in 2 dimensions. One has to be the serious part, the 2-dimensional part, seeing the photographs on the walls and so on. But the other part could be the fun part, going to Melbourne for a food festival while you're going to the art galleries. And that allows another form of art to be enjoyed also. So I think it's fairly important for us in Australia, either within the country or internationally, to allow more and more of these opportunities to come through, where it's just not about arts, but also other ancillary activities, whether it's Grand Prix sports, but then bring them in the art museums, do things with the visiting people to enjoy the whole arts present of that state, be it art in a gallery or be it art in the restaurants out there. And to your question, whether it should be the responsibility of of the governments, whosoever takes the responsibility of marketing has to be most important, has to be jazzed up, it has to be more sexy to ensure that people feel excited about coming to these art festivals. And so Tracey and I were talking, as Tracey said, about Mona, and that, I think, gives you a picture of how exciting, what wonderful marketing has been done, that sitting in Sydney, we're talking about an art museum in Tasmania.
And privately funded. And I think that's quite interesting part of the debate as well, isn't it? Because, the private funding there has worked so well. Someone, Douglas on Facebook, says that no public funding of the arts seems very much like the American model of the arts being supported by philanthropy and such. Let's not go down the American pathway and give the arts some certainty. Manjit says, without the artists, we will never know ourselves. And that's true too.
So
and I think it's so important also, tourism, as you're talking about, Con, not just bringing people here, but a lot of our artists actually go on tour overseas, don't they? I know a lot of our Indigenous dance groups, other dance groups, our ensemble theatres.
Your cultural soft power.
Absolutely.
And it's so important to have the artistic soft power, which can play a fantastic role on international platform. I would say I'm originally from India, and the moment you talk about art, culture, the first thing which comes to your mind is Bollywood.
Yes.
So that's a soft power where you go beyond issues in the country and talk about the art and culture. In Australia, with its Indigenous art and culture, the history.
Oh, and
which
we're
we have,
pretty good at
such
Bollywood also. Come on. We've got Brett Lee.
We do have
Con,
Brett Lee.
Thank you so much for your call tonight.
Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Con.
Thank you. You too. We are taking your calls on 1300 22 5576. We do have time for a couple more callers. Let's go to Linda, who's been waiting patiently. Hi, Linda.
Hi.
What would you like to say?
Well, Tracey, I'd like to say that I think basically we're being conditioned into one perspective. I disagree with you about football being an art. It's actually a competitive sport. I'm actually an artist myself. I've been unemployed and homeless, so it's not either or shall we support art or should we support homeless people. Actually, a lot of artists, as I said, are on the street, and I've been there myself. So I'd like to say that basically, as I said, I think we're being conditioned into one perspective, and sport is actually a competitive thing. Art is a totally individual, separate thing. When you look at something or when you're trying to say something, you actually express it. It's not a team sport whatsoever. And I think basically, as I've said, we're becoming rather thuggery. I think it's quite horrendous what's going on, actually. The amount of monies that is given to, as you've said, other subsidies. Let's face it, we're subsidising coal. We actually have a major problem with what's going on with the planet and the climate, and we're subsidising that which does it. As I said, I think we're being conditioned into one perspective. The artist actually is not given free speech because it is not supported. It is actually ridiculed often. And I just find that we're really heading down the wrong track as a culture because, as you said, that is what art actually portrays, your culture or the culture you're living in.
Linda, I don't disagree with what you're saying at all, and I understand you make some really good points. One of those things where you talk about getting pushed into some sort of a narrow tunnel and a monoculture, if you like. I remember during the Sydney Olympics, and there was an art competition that was held for each year of school. So it started at the kindergarten level and it went all the way through to year 12 in high school, and calling for designs. And I've got to say, I remember seeing them come in to the arts program at SOCOG, and the kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, the art was just fabulous. Every single piece was different. It was a mishmash of colours. It was ideas. And as you saw them get older, you definitely did see them start to move towards, well, this is what we expect by 4th grade, this is what we expect by 6th grade, and year 9 is something else. And when you got to year 12, there were some fabulous pieces, but it was almost like they were different versions of the same thing, very prescriptive. And that is a problem. But one thing I don't agree with you, Linda, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, is that I think by having these discussions and by having programs like this and by actually having artists provide their artwork and showing us options, then we're not going to end up only having that tunnel vision. So thank you for being an artist. And thank you for calling.
We are ending up being that tunnel visioned. And I'd just like to say, when Germany went into its cultural decline, the first to go was the arts and the intellects.
Yeah, and a lot, and thank goodness that has all come back in Germany because the art scene is flourishing.
Yes.
Linda, thank you for your call. What sort of art do you do, Linda?
I do sculpture as well as two-dimensional visual art.
All right.
And I also
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for your call.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good to talk to you. It's interesting, isn't it? We've got to keep looking outward, haven't we, Pawan?
We do.
Because the temptation sometimes is to just...
and it's been fascinating, the type of calls we have had, so diverse and so many different views which have been presented. It's absolutely brilliant.
So if you're looking at the situation at the moment, do you think it's a healthy situation, the funding of the arts where we sit now?
I think we can do with some more, but I also feel that we need to be creative also, to be self-responsible, to be able to create more funding in ourselves, be it through, as I mentioned earlier, the arts lottery or the philanthropic activities and so on. I think there needs to be a good mix between artistic endeavors, which feed the soul, plus there has to be an underlay of some commercial reality. And how we get the mix get the mix right is a challenge.
Yeah, I think it's so important to keep that sort of artistic education for kids, because that is where all the ideas are going to come from for our future generations. Glenn says on Facebook, when the government can look after the country's basic infrastructure that is important to all Australians and the cost of living being at a level that allows everyone to be able to not stress, once that is occurring, and now once we have that balance is a reality, then it's viable to put money into art, but only at the lower levels to promote new artists. And Gay Tricky says art is free, just keep on with it, even if it's only in your imaginations.
Wonderfully said.
Hear to that. Thank you so much to all our callers. Pawan Luthra, thank you so much for being our guest in the studio
Tracey.
Today.
It was a pleasure.
You've been listening to Q&A Extra here on ABC News Radio and streaming live on Facebook. Of course, we'll be back again next week. Until then, you all take care.